Nobody in Courtroom 9 had expected the ankle monitor data to become the most important piece of evidence in a murder trial. But then again, nobody had expected Brandon Kelsey to be stupid enough to cheat it. He had walked in that morning with the quiet arrogance of a man whose attorney had already whispered reassurances into his ear, shoulders back, jaw set, eyes scanning the gallery with the practiced casualness of someone performing innocence rather than living it. He was 39 years old, the owner of 3 car dealerships and a vacation property on Lake Tahoe, and he had spent the better part of 11 months treating this courtroom the way he treated most rooms, as a space that existed to accommodate him. That assumption was about to be surgically removed. Judge Patricia Fleischer had not yet entered, but the evidence had already arrived before her, and it was sitting in a sealed folder on the prosecution's table, and the assistant DA kept one hand flat on top of it, the way you keep a hand on something that might otherwise escape. If you have ever watched a man smile in a room that is quietly filling with water, subscribe right now because this story is about the exact moment the water reached his chin and he finally looked down. The victim's name was Soren Adler. He was 31 years old, a freelance sound engineer who had rented the guest house on Brandon Kelsey's Lake Tahoe property for 8 months before his body was discovered in a dry creek bed 4 miles from the property line, partially concealed beneath deadfall, in the kind of location that does not happen by accident and does not happen without knowledge of the terrain. Soren had been reported missing by his sister, Nadia, who had driven 6 hours when his text stopped and filed a police report that sat unescalated for 9 days before a hiker found what the creek bed had been keeping. Nadia Adler sat in the front row of the gallery every session in a dark green jacket, a small silver ring on her right hand that had been Soren's. She had identified it in the evidence photographs and asked quietly if she could have it back when this was over. She had not yet received an answer. Brandon Kelsey had been fitted with an ankle monitor as a condition of his release on bail, which his attorney had argued for aggressively and won. The monitor was standard issue, GPS enabled, tamper resistant, set with exclusion zones that included the Lake Tahoe property and a 1 mile radius around Soren Adler's last known contacts. The court had been assured, in writing, by Kelsey's defense team that their client was cooperating fully with all monitoring conditions. He was home every night by 10. The monitor confirmed it. The logs were clean. The defense had submitted 30 days of location data as evidence of their client's good faith compliance. That was the official version of events. Then, a telecommunications forensics analyst named Dr. Patricia Wu appeared for the prosecution, carrying a laptop and the particular energy of someone who has found something that cannot be unexplained. The courtroom went silent before she even began. Dr. Wu explained in the measured cadence of someone translating devastation into language a courtroom could process that standard ankle monitor GPS systems operate on cellular tower triangulation supplemented by satellite positioning. She explained that the device assigned to Brandon Kelsey had been functioning normally. She then explained that the location data submitted by the defense, the 30 days of clean, compliant logs, was technically accurate. She then explained what the defense had not submitted and had hoped no one would request: the raw signal integrity data from the monitor's internal accelerometer and heat sensor. Brandon Kelsey's ankle monitor had registered a body temperature of 98.4 degrees and continuous human movement for every second of every night for 30 days. That was what the GPS logs showed. The integrity data told a different story. On 11 specific nights, spread across the past 6 weeks, the monitor's heat sensor had detected a stationary thermal profile inconsistent with a living human body. On those same 11 nights, the accelerometer had logged 0 movement for periods ranging from 4 to 7 hours. Someone had removed the monitor, replaced it with a heat source, a hand warmer, Dr. Wu suggested, based on the thermal signature, and left it stationary while the GPS pinged a compliant location all night. The courtroom did not gasp. It did something worse. It went completely, collectively, devastatingly still. Nadia Adler's hand moved to the silver ring on her right finger and stayed there. Judge Fleischer looked at Brandon Kelsey for a long moment without speaking. He was no longer leaning back in his chair. He was very upright now, very still, the performance of casualness having departed his body so completely, it was hard to remember it had ever been there. His attorney was writing something rapidly on a yellow legal pad. The pen was moving fast enough to suggest panic. Then Kelsey made the mistake. Perhaps it was the silence. Perhaps it was 11 months of believing that money and attorneys and a good suit constitute a force field. Whatever the reason, Brandon Kelsey turned to his lead counsel and said, in a voice not quite low enough, with a small, tight smile that had no business existing on his face in that moment, "They can't prove where I was. They can only prove where I wasn't." Someone in the gallery made a sound, a single, involuntary exhale of disbelief. Judge Fleischer turned her head toward the defense table with the slow deliberateness of someone who has heard everything she needed to hear and is now simply deciding what to do with it. "Mr. Kelsey," she said, "I want to be certain the record reflects what you just said." His attorney rose immediately. Judge Fleischer silenced him with one raised hand. Not dramatically, not sharply, just raised, the way you stop something small from interrupting something important. She then turned to face both tables and delivered the monologue that people in that courthouse would be repeating for years. She said that she had presided over bail conditions that were violated, over evidence that was contested, over testimony that conflicted. These were the ordinary textures of a trial. What she had not previously encountered was a defendant who had filed falsified compliance data with this court, who had used a thermal decoy to deceive a monitoring system whose entire purpose was to protect the integrity of these proceedings, and who had the audacity in this room, in front of this bench, to treat the gap between what was proven and what was true as though it were a loophole rather than an accusation. She said, with a quietness that made the words heavier rather than lighter, "This court does not operate on the principle that what cannot be proven did not happen. This court operates on the principle that what has been revealed about your character is now part of the record. And what has been revealed, Mr. Kelsey, is that you have been lying to this court since the day you left it." His bail was revoked before the afternoon recess. He was taken into custody while Nadia Adler watched from the front row with her hand still on Soren's ring and her eyes absolutely dry. 3 months later, the location data from the 11 nights, cross-referenced with cell tower pings from a burner phone recovered from a storage unit registered to a Shell LLC, traced back to Kelsey, placed him within 2 miles of the creek bed on the night Soren Adler's body was left there. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Brandon Kelsey was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. After sentencing, Nadia Adler was given Soren's ring. She put it on in the hallway outside the courtroom, standing next to her mother, and neither of them said anything for a long time. They didn't need to. The silence was a different kind now, not the silence of a room holding its breath, but the silence of something finally, irreversibly over. A hand warmer. 11 nights. The assumption that absence of proof was the same as proof of absence. Brandon Kelsey had been wrong about the monitor, wrong about the data, and wrong, most fatally, about the kind of courtroom he was sitting in. Justice does not always arrive loudly, but sometimes it arrives in a forensics analyst with a laptop and 30 days of thermal data, in a judge who refuses to let the space between what is proven and what is true become a place for powerful men to live comfortably. If this story reached into something real for you, share it. Someone needs to see that the truth has a temperature, and it is always warmer than a hand warmer left on a nightstand by a man who thought he was clever. Like this video. Subscribe if you are here for the stories where every single detail eventually matters. And leave a comment. What was the moment it broke open for you? Because for me, it was a woman in a dark green jacket, one hand on a silver ring, watching water finally reach the chin of a man who had been smiling for 11 months.